Hi, I'm Rocket, and welcome to my channel. Scholar has been out for a month, and after some updates, it's time to grade the Scholar on release. If you've been considering playing Scholar, then this is the video for you. I'm going to give some thoughts on all formats of PvE and PvP. Let's find out if she passed the test. Before I get into it, if you're new to my channel, please give a like and a sub. I would really appreciate it. So 2 weeks ago, I was able to get my Aether boots by completing the Flame, and of course, I one-tap Duo. Fallen God armor seemed to be the only thing that I can tap in this game. That kind of freed me to go explore the class and try her in different areas. So I went around and tried her at Poly, Centaurs, Orcs, Gyfin. By the way, at Gyfin, I pulled almost 27k trash on the yellow, so she's solid at Gyfin. All the way upwards to Tungred Ruins, just to get a good feel on how the class is currently performing. But what I was really excited for was to get into PvP more. I'm a PvP centric player. I love the combat in the game. It's one of the reasons I still play the game. So Nodewar, Siege, RBF, AoS. I do a lot of AoS. It's kind of like my open world replacement since they changed the guild deck changes. And she kind of broke my heart, not gonna lie. I was really disappointed and I tried everything. Believe me, I tried everything, but I just couldn't do it. I tried everything. I tried different cores, different add-ons, even went as far as buying the whole Lightstone jump kit. So I got the Lightstones, I did the crystals, and I did the elixir as well, just to get as much jump height to see if all the damage was hitting behind that 60% damage increase, but I couldn't get damage out of her. I just could not find the burst in this class. I mean, I tried everything. So let's get into some thoughts. Let's start off with PvE. In PvE, she's a solid B to an A. She has good passives. With some minor tweaks, I can see this class catching up to the Magus and the Wusas and some of those higher S tier classes and kind of breaking into that low S tier to S tier range for PvE. Low end is one of the reasons that I kind of brought her down to like a high B to an A. In low end, the fact that her Q warp fails so much is really impacting her movement ability. In low end, you need a lot of movement to get from one pack to the other and kill those small packs and just keep on running, kind of like at Centaurs or at Polys. She's not new player friendly. Scholar skills have a lot of inputs for like very little results. I wouldn't recommend her as a main right now if you're starting the game. If you're starting the game, I would recommend like a Musa or a Zerk, something that's really mobile when you get from one place to another fast and just cast a skill and move on to the next one. Her abilities have small AoEs, and in early game where you need to kill large amount of mobs that are all spread out, small AoEs and glitched movement is causing issues for her. In mid game, she's good. Her movement still hurts, but after you get into mid game, kind of like those orgs, those Elvia regions, she really starts to pick up. Her passive lets you enter areas a lot easier and safer than other classes would. Her AoEs could use a buff to account for those larger packs at orcs, but she does fine with those Elvia weapons. She can kill efficiently, but she's lagging behind that top end S tiers in the mid game, where the classes are very mobile and can dish out big damage to a lot of mobs at one time. But she isn't bad in mid game. End game, this is where she starts to get a lot better. The same AP and DP passes that help her reach monster brackets in mid game definitely help reach those AP soft brackets in late game. And in late game, packs tend to be smaller and tighter, so you have less movement and you end up just dumping all her damage on one area and just hitting more of those mobs at once, which for her is perfect because her AoEs aren't large. Also at late game, her accuracy rate passes allow her to use more AP crystals for PvE. Instead of needing to slot an extra accuracy crystal, you can remove that and add an AP crystal just to give you a little more damage. However, with a class for a 30 AP passive and all the other things she got going for her, her damage is somehow lacking. Like if you put a natural 30 AP buff on another class, you would really feel it. But for her, even with all that extra damage, she is still lagging behind some of the better S tier PvE classes. Let's get into PvP. This is my biggest gripe with this class. I don't know if I still don't understand her or what. For me, she gets a C to a B. Like she is nearly failing in PvP. The more people you start to add to her fights, the more her usability goes out the window. Like she literally jumps off a cliff when you start to add more people. So it's a good thing she doesn't take fall damage. In 1v1, yes, the class is good in 1v1 because of her grab. But if you're fighting more competitive 1v1 classes, like those good strikers, those ninjas, those rangers, she's gonna get outplayed. They have more things in the kit they can utilize to get either behind you or just close gap really quickly to go into a grab or a stun or some sort of CC. The good thing about it, she can stay protected through all that, but she ends up not being able to trade. A lot of her skills end up being stationary and her damage ends up hitting nothing. But once you do land a grab, she can just dump a lot of damage. And her high accuracy rate and accuracy rate passive helps her hit those evasion targets easier. Now for small scale or Solaire, the class is like a B. This is when she starts to fall off. Her AoE sizes start to becoming more of an issue here, where she's trying to go in and deal damage to the targets, but a lot of her damage is either missing or just hitting one target because the AoEs are so small. So it affects her ability to trade safely or just trade at all. Her DP and damage reduction passives help her. And then on top of that, she has the heal and debuff passives that she applies to enemies. So that's helping her as well. So even with all these buffs and debuffs, she is still barely relevant. In trade scenarios, she's kind of useless. If you don't get a grab, you're just not dealing any relevant damage to the other team. And there's just better kits to go about if you want to rely on a grab. A wide variety, Warrior, Zerg, Guardian, where those kits are just better at trading than she is. And here's my biggest gripe with her, large scale. For all those shot callers out there, large scale, she's failed. She's unacceptable. She's not good in any scenario. Not flex, not main ball, not defense. Her ability to jump high and come down, it's cool, but landing those big hits, it's kind of flawed, right? So let's say I want to engage with my CC here. I'm gonna jump into that target over there. But at the time my class comes from being in the air to down, in an actual war, that class will move. So your damage is already, your big damage, your quote, big damage is completely missing. So let's say they don't move and they actually do stay there and just get hit. Now you got the CC, but she can't do anything. She'll try to cast skills and try to do damage. And she's not gonna be able to finish out that class. She's gonna get up and go away. So she's still done nothing. She's still done nothing. Not in capped content and not in uncapped. I tried them in both. When she dives in, she's really difficult to get any damage out. In uncapped, oh my god, I promise you I was dying as soon as I landed in the ball. And I mean, I tried everything I could to get damage out of this class. The lightstone sets, the crystals, the elixirs, none of that helped. All her damage was most of the time hitting empty space, or the fight has shifted. Most of the time I was just hitting nothing. I mean, I cannot recommend Scholar for any serious Nodewar scenario. And I'm a Scholar main. I don't want that to be the case, but I cannot take this class to Nodewar anymore. So my recommendation for those people that are trying to get into Scholar, that are kind of looking from the outside in, is just to wait a couple weeks, see if we get some buffs, see if we get some glitches fixed, and then possibly try out the class. I wouldn't recommend going to the class right now. It has a lot of things that needs to be fixed. Kind of hold on just a little bit to see if we get those changes. So overall, I think the release for this class is almost a borderline fail. I don't be that hard with PA, but this has been one of the buggiest releases of a new class I can think of since like Sage, where he was getting all those issues where he would go into structures and kind of either have to be escaped or relogged. And on top of having those issues, she is literally one of the weakest kits I have ever seen released in the game in general. We're in a damage meta, and this class just doesn't do damage. Somehow this class does not do damage. The QQ warp ability still being bugged is causing a lot of issues for her in PvP and PvE. I can say depending on your terrain, you can assume that your QQ warp will fail all the time. It got to the point, especially mid-war, where you're going through all these different terrains, where I just won't use her QQ warp. I know that it's gonna fail and I'm gonna stay in that spot and I'm probably gonna take more damage, so I just go right into another movement skill. And that's not how the class is supposed to be played, so you end up burning a lot more stamina. Her passives are great for PvE and PvP. They let you access more geared areas sooner, but somehow with all those passives, she is still lagging behind the top end PvE classes by a decent margin. And I'm taking out Wusa because Wusa is the exception. She's kind of broken in her own way. In PvP, aside from her grab, the class doesn't have much going for her. Her anti-heal mechanic isn't really doing anything, I can't tell. I saw it be effective once in Scholar, but is it working in Nodewar? I'm not sure, I can't feel it. And to top it off, even aside from all those issues, the damage issues, the mobility issues with QQ Warp glitch, she has stamina issues. If you're uncareful mid-fight and you stay in there too long, you will find yourself out of stamina. In this damage meta, her lack of damage doesn't make sense. Yesterday in a tier 4 Nodewar, I had a Awakened Ranger grab me and two-shot me. They blit me out of existence in less than 2 seconds from 100 to 0. Out of a grab, 100 to 0. I don't get it. I don't get it. You're telling me that class can two-shot. We're not even talking about Drax and other classes that are broken for damage. This is an Awakened Ranger. So why doesn't Scholar do any damage? So final thoughts, I mean, the class could use some buffs. Absolutely need to find a way to fix QQ Warp. Not having the Q Warp right now is very difficult depending on terrain. I think once they fix that skill, it'll really help the class both in PvE and PvP. A lot of her AoEs are still too small, and that's hurting her in both PvE and PvP. A lot of her damage is just missing targets outright. In my opinion, she could go back to the speed that she was from Scholar on Global Labs before she was released. I want to say in Global Labs before release, she was probably like 15 to 20% faster. Like she felt like she had 100 running all the time. And that would help her both in PvE and PvP. Instead of dumping all your damage takes 15 seconds, it might take 12 seconds now. And it's also going to help in PvP just to deal more damage on those 1v1s and single targets, but it still won't help her in large scale. Her PvP damage reduction rates are way too aggressive. Like a lot of her skills just feel like they do nothing. Like she might have 1 or 2 skills that like, oh, that was kind of chunky, but the rest of the damage, where is it? It's just not there. Her PvE damage numbers could use some buffs just to fit the high damage meta we're in now. For a class that has a 30 AP buff, her not doing no damage just doesn't make any sense. And her hype buff damage increase mechanic isn't very used. What's the point of it? Aside from one giant leap and its flow, there really isn't any other skill that takes advantage of her hype buff damage increase. So if we could see a few more skills implement that, I think that would be more beneficial instead of just being on one skill. And that's kind of a wrap. I just wanted to get this video out to kind of shine a light on the state of Scholar 1 month after release to help those people kind of deciding whether I should go into this class or not, and just kind of watching it from afar because she does look really cool. And I think the class potential is there. They just need to unlock a lot of her skills, which she feels really capped. Here shortly, I'll make a new PvP guide. I've been working on new PvP combos, and I've came up with a couple new combos that actually deal more DPS than in my last video. But other than that, thank you for watching, and you guys have a good day. Peace.